This video is going to help us learn about parallel and perpendicular lines. So the first type of line we're going to look at is parallel lines. If I had the equation y equals 3 over 4x, so 3 divided by 4x plus 5, we can see that the y-intercept is at 5 and the slope is 3 over 4. We're going to go up 3 and over 4 to go from one point to another point on the line. Now when we have parallel lines, that means that the lines have the very same slope and they run side by side. They're never going to cross, they're never going to touch. So if we wanted to write a parallel line, all we would have to do is make sure that the slope for the next line is exactly the same. So if I write 3 divided by 4x, I can write any other number afterwards for my y-intercept and I'm going to have a parallel line. I could write plus 0, so it's going through the origin at 0, 0. I could write plus 2. The y-intercept is at 2, but it has the same slope, up 3 and over 4. I could have a negative value. It's going to be down here, crossing at negative 2, but you can see that these two lines are never going to cross because they're parallel. They have the same slope. I could do another line here, y equals 3 over 4 minus 1. Oh, I didn't put it in right. 3 over 4x minus 1. You can see we've got 3 parallel lines here because they all have the same slope of 3 over 4. All right, now when we look at parallel lines, remember they can also go in a negative direction, the slopes. So we could have y equals negative 1 over 2x plus 5, for example. And if we wanted to write a parallel line, we could have y equals negative 1 over 2x and have any other number as our y-intercept, and we'll get a parallel line. There's 9, there's 6, there's 4, there's 1. All of these lines that I've drawn are parallel. So that's the key. When you're writing parallel lines, they have the very same slope. Now the next term that you need to know today is perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that cross each other, and they cross each other at a 90-degree angle. They intersect perfectly. So when we look at the equations of the lines, what we notice is that the slopes are flipped and the opposite sign, called negative reciprocals. Reciprocal means flip, and negative means you would be multiplying by negative 1. So for the purple line up here, we had a slope of negative 1/2 x. If we want to draw a line that's going to be perpendicular to that line, we would have to take the slope, flip it, and multiply by negative 1. So let's have a look here. If I take this line and I flip it, so I've got negative 2 divided by 1, but I also have to multiply by negative 1 to get a perpendicular line. So here we can see we've got two lines. They cross each other at a 90-degree angle, and when you look at the slopes, they are flipped and multiplied by negative 1. So let's do another perpendicular line to the purple line. Y equals, we want 2 over 1 again, because we flipped it and multiplied by negative 1. And I'm going to use plus 6 as my y-intercept. So you can see that the red line and the black line are perpendicular to the purple line. They're at 90 degrees. I'm going to do one more example of perpendicular lines with you. So if we had y equals 3x plus 1, how would we draw a perpendicular line to this equation? Well, we want to flip the slope and multiply by negative 1. So right now the slope is 3, or 3 over 1. So if you flip it, the opposite would be 1 over 3 x plus any value we want. But notice it didn't work out because I flipped it, but I didn't multiply yet by negative 1. So I've got to get that negative sign in there. Now we can see that we have two perpendicular lines crossing at 90 degrees because we've got a flipped slope and multiplied by negative 1, a negative reciprocal slope. The last example I'm going to do with you is a special case. If we have y equals 3, we've got a perfectly straight horizontal line here. And if you were asked to draw a line that's parallel to that line, well, we don't have a slope here that we can flip because the slope is 0. We can't flip that. So the special case is when we have a vertical line. That happens when x equals some number. So here if we put in x equals 3, you can see that they're crossing at 90 degrees. Or x equals 2. Or we could have x equals -1. So sometimes the easiest way to figure out a perpendicular line to a line that's a special case like y equals 3 or x equals 2 would be to sketch it and then to think about, well, what would the other line look like that's going to be perpendicular? So I'm going to go the other way around this time. If we've got x equals 2, okay, that's what that line looks like. If I want to draw a line that's parallel to it, I would write x equals, in any value, it's going to be parallel. So here's x equals 5. They're going to run side by side. They're never going to touch. If I want to draw a line that is perpendicular to it at 90 degrees, I'm going to write y equals some number. So y equals 4, or I could have y equals -1. That line is perpendicular to the x lines.